I'm pleased to introduce Parag Khanna, who is a leading global strategy advisor to companies and governments around the world, and a best-selling author. You may have read one or more of his many thought-provoking books, the most recent titled The Future is Asian: Commerce, Conflict, and Culture in the 21st Century. And you may have seen or read his interviews in just about every major media outlet globally. Parag is also the founder and managing partner of Future Map, a data and scenario-based strategic advisory firm doing some very exciting work, which he'll share with us. His talk tonight begins with the question, 4 billion people are ready to move, where will they go? Which I suspect he's going to show us a little bit about that. So I'm delighted to welcome Parag to MIT. Hi, Parag. Thanks for joining us from Singapore tonight.
Steve, so good to be with you. It's morning over here, but I'm really glad that you were able to accommodate the different time zones as only MIT could. No, really, thanks so much for having me join you. It's a fascinating subject.
And we're delighted to have you here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got some great information to share, and then I'll come back and we'll have a discussion and do some Q&A. Is that okay?
Absolutely, looking forward to it. So, this is where we are on, the issue about the preparedness of real estate for climate change. We have a wide range of apps, tools, data-driven services that are looking at the exposure of specific geographies, particularly coastal cities, and then breaking down, by the various industry players, United States, North America, globally, in terms of their climate exposure. We know that, we have to discount the future value of real estate. We know whether the insurance industry is now reacting and, making it more difficult, obviously, to get insurance for these areas. Already in the policy domain, there's talk about the need for eminent domain to deal with the issue of climate exposure. What I'm trying to do is to think more broadly around human geography. So not just short-term migration, not just the issue of, coastal real estate here and there, but the biggest question I think we can ask is, where will the 9 billion people of the future of the year 2050 actually physically reside? It's a huge topic that I'm, finishing an entire book about right now, but I'm going to try and distill some of this very small slice of that overall argument into just a couple of slides here. And this has led to an idea around using data more widely for this future forecasting around human geography and the geographies that are most propitious for human habitation. So not just a punitive assessment of which geographies are most at risk, but which geographies are actually going to thrive. And that's what we call the Climate Oases Project. And we are trying to do a much broader interdisciplinary exercise around taking data that relates to everything from climate change, as the title of this initiative suggests, that is broken down into clusters. So it could be extreme weather vulnerability, rising temperatures, issues related to just the broader ecology, like fresh water availability, quality of the soil for agriculture, but also socioeconomic, demographic data, transportation, proximity to transportation, some of the new investments that are being made in various geographies to really create a more complex model and forecasting around which zip codes, really right down to the CBSA and zip code level, a state right now primarily focused on the lower 48 US states, are going to benefit from not just climate change, but really all of these trends and how they fit together. And to think of it as a tool that benefits the property sector, but of course governments and their planning and other stakeholders as well. So let me just get back to that broader thrust. Again, I say my focus is on human geography, and it may sound like the thrust of the argument is moving away from coastal cities, and that would be perhaps ironic, given that, Steve, my writing has focused a lot on megacities, global megacities. And in this map on the upper left, what you're seeing is the sort of pixelated cartogram of the world's population. Every single human being a pixel on this map, and the most dense areas being those in yellow and pink and so forth. And these are, of course, the world population is mostly Asian, and much of it is in coastal megacities, either in Asia or around the world, and many of those are threatened. So On the bottom right, however, you have a rendition of where our sort of natural agricultural geography will be. So leaving aside urban farming, hydroponics, and all of the other tools that we are developing to be able to grow food in more hostile environments. But natural agricultural geography forecasted shift in the latitude of that agricultural geography if world temperatures rise 3 or more degrees Celsius above the 1990 IPCC baseline. As you know, Steve, most people are pessimistic about us being able to prevent that from being the case. So I was looking at this mismatch, and both of these maps are from the same book, Connectography. So on the one hand, I was depicting and researching the concentration of people into coastal cities. On the other hand, looking at the climate effects or climate trends, one sees that much of our natural livable habitat might be in the northern latitudes. And I wanted to explore that mismatch, and that's what motivated this new book. So as I say here, the Arctic Circle is home to a whopping 5 million people out of a population that is growing towards 9 billion people. And, we titled this presentation, 4 billion people are ready to move. And to get, I won't explain the whole methodology behind getting to 4 billion. It's obviously just a bunch of, rounding of numbers, looking at which populations are potential migrants based on where they are, based on, sort of their age composition of countries, the countries that are the largest providers of migrants and their proximity to other countries to which they tend to migrate, and so on and so forth. But let's just say that 4 billion people could potentially move. And that's not far off of actually what you see in various forecasts. So for example, some recent research done by NASA, National Academy of Sciences, and universities has talked about how for every degree increase in global temperature, Celsius, about 1 billion people no longer live in the optimal band of human settlement and agriculture that we have grown accustomed to over the last couple of thousand years. So when you get to 4 degrees Celsius rise, that actually is 4 billion people and no longer in the geography that was most conducive to human habitation. And so that's what I wanted to get at then, is not only, moving beyond only climate, because I think the project, and especially as it relates to industry, we don't think enough and price climate change enough. We also don't think about complexity enough and the multiple variables that have these complex interactions that drive human migration over time. So I wanted to enumerate them and to look at each of them in isolation and the various variables within them, and then to combine them into an aggregate picture of where people would be moving and why. Now, over the last 75 years, there are a wide range of drivers of human migration that have nothing to do with climate change, because first and foremost, the major migrant flows through the 20th century were driven by demographic imbalances and labor shortages. Think about Europe after World War II, the United States as well, the migration within the post-colonial populations, particularly South Asians to the Persian Gulf, as those economies modernized. Then political upheaval, civil wars, international conflicts, also a lot of 20th century and particularly post-World War II phenomena. Economic crises, which are a regular occurrence in different regions of the world at different times, but we think about collapsed economies and the impact that has. And that ties together, of course, with political upheaval. Just think about the Arab Spring and the mass migrations out of the Middle East in the last 10 years or so. Technological automation, right? People moving because their work is made redundant in different places. So again, these numbers 2, 3, and 4 relate to each other if you just look at the Great Lakes region and look at the Rust Belt of the United States, right? You've had political change, economic crisis, technological automation simultaneously, and that has driven an exodus of people out of that region. Now we have climate change, and I've obviously tacked on the pandemic. I'm in the process of what I call COVIDifying my book manuscript, which was finished in January. And now, of course, one wants to update and be a bit more, sort of add this new layer of motivations why people move, people wanting to move from what we're calling red zones to green zones, right? Those with poor health infrastructure and capacity and governance in the response to the pandemic towards those geographies or locations or polities, cities, countries, otherwise, that have done a better job. And so there's the move to green zones when we talk about health, blue zones when we talk about environment. Generally speaking, less climate and politically propitious places towards better, right? And migration is almost always about relative gains, isn't it, right? Just being, looking for a place that's marginally better than where you are. What are people looking for in terms of this relative gains? Well, this is my attempt at sort of a Tom Friedman-esque phraseology: latitude, altitude, and attitude, right? What are the sort of, virtues that people are looking for in the future? Those that can afford to move, or those whose labor or talent is in demand. So food security, ecological sustainability, freshwater supply, circular economy, healthcare, so on and so on and so forth. So these are the kinds of things that, if you take what we tend to think of as like the basket of goods, what are the things that most people spend on? Healthcare, education, housing, transportation, and so forth. What are the things that people want to be able to spend the most affordable, or have the most affordable access to these services, and live in these resilient sort of geographies? So is there an overlap of that, and what are the places that are doing the best job of providing that kind of, let's call it, climate oases as a service to the world? And those are obviously the places where the real estate industry should be looking in a forward-looking way, in a 10, 20, 30, 40-year way. And I personally always enjoy working with the kind of long-term thinking industries like this, or in the case of real estate, quite frankly, needs to think even longer term than they do, in the same way that some of the asset managers, for example, do think in these long time horizons. And I think we have to get to that level, and again, think about the interplay of these various factors. So there's, I'm going to just mention the punchline actually in my book, and this may or may not be friendly to the industry, but it's that actually people are going to be moving a lot more, not just about a one-way move, but moving, because there are very few places in the world where you can say with full confidence that right now I should go and build there. I should build, affordable housing, retirement colonies, warehousing, office space, whatever the case may be, because I know that 30, 40 years from now, it will not be vulnerable to that list of 6 or 7 risk factors around climate, potentially becoming overpopulated, being a victim of its own success, becoming too popular, and everyone going there and it's suffering the tragedy of the commons, right? Or again, being at risk of political upheaval, economic disruption, technological disruptions as well. So there's no place you can be perfectly confident in, right? Just think, maybe if we were having this conversation just 6 months ago, Steve, we'd say, oh, it's simple, let's all move to Sweden. But we know that, Sweden hasn't exactly been the paragon of good governance when it comes to how they chose to handle the pandemic. And of course, they're having issues with, there are not that many migrants compared to other Scandinavian countries. They've been quite generous, but already there's political tensions as a result of the fairly, modest level of migration that they have in the country. So can you be so sure that you want to be in Sweden 20 years from now, right? And as you know, we've got forest fires raging, even across Siberia. There's forest fires in Greenland. People didn't even know Greenland had forests. And so, people are going to be moving rather than just making one single move. That said, of course, one has to plan, one has to invest. So one of the things I've been looking at as a metric, if you will, a couple of things I've been looking at. One is just appreciation of land. So I give you the example of Canada here on the right. House price index in Canada. Now, Canada is doing a lot of things right under the circumstances. It's certainly not a country that is greening itself yet, though there's more talk about doing so. It is obviously very migrant friendly, allowing in on a per capita basis far more migrants than the United States, with less than about 10% of the population. Then there are countries that have these investor residency schemes, and you've actually seen in the wake of the pandemic, countries like Thailand and others really ramp up their offers to be sort of safe havens, healthy countries, a free medical service and so forth in exchange for investment. Now, this has been going on for 10, 15 years, but we'll see more and more countries brand themselves as safe havens for those sort of, whether it's climate refugees, high net worth individuals, or even now, as we see Estonia and other countries doing, which is to lure people who are remote workers. Because one of the consequences of the pandemic, obviously, is more remote work and people saying, well, maybe I can just work remotely from a more affordable country. There's, again, so many motivations that feed into each other. And we're trying very hard to kind of quantify these trends, if you will. So couple of things, a couple of final points around what these sort of safe geographies need to do. This is specifically from a climate, food, or agrotech perspective to sustain resilience even in the face of climate change, and then leaving aside some of the issues around political and other variables. And this is a fascinating area that has been accelerating and certainly will really take off in the wake of the pandemic. So I give you a few examples here on what's happening with agriculture. So in the genetic space of genetic modification of cattle and livestock, to cope with some of the pestilence you've been seeing in the news, actually a lot around the locust swarms that are heading out of East Africa and moving to South Asia. There's other irritants in the agricultural sector. There is a sustained, what scientists call a mega drought affecting the southern United States as well as South Asia and China. So genetically modified, the role of GMO kinds of factors in the agricultural sector will be critical for local resilience. We've also seen in the wake of the pandemic, not for the first time, countries like Russia have to ban the export of wheat. So we need to improve yields in countries that are not traditional geographies for the production of certain crops. So I've highlighted some of the countries and companies that are doing the most in that area. Then food quality certification. So being a net exporter of food that is produced in hydroponic, aquaponic facilities or otherwise. Here we know that Australia, New Zealand, and others have actually done a lot with food tracing technologies in order to provide for the Chinese market, because the quality of food is such a huge issue there. And this again, has a big impact obviously on the real estate sector, because of course, if countries are building entire ecosystems around their artificial agricultural supply chains and production, that has significant consequences for what industries, what geographies, what kinds of facilities one wants to be building and investing in a wide range of countries that we traditionally haven't thought of. Food storage infrastructure is a part of that equation. And then I mentioned at the bottom the hydroponic and aquaponics. Now I'll give you a direct example. I live here in Singapore, and they had a 30 by 30 initiative. So 30, they want to, and of course, for those who don't know, Singapore imports 99.9% of its food, of course. To move towards having 30% of its staple crops produced in these kinds of facilities, even fish farming as well, by the year 2030. In the wake of the pandemic, as difficult as it's been with the simultaneous supply and demand shocks, they've realized they need to speed that up. And I think they probably want to get to that 2030 target more like by 2023. And there's a lot of countries doing the same thing. So if you add up all of this around how to use genetic modification, how to do more artificial crop development, the whole new food storage ecosystem, warehousing, distribution, supply chain, huge opportunity there. Let me make a couple of points about the United States. As I mentioned, we are trying to train our data down to a more granular level. But people need to appreciate more broadly the climatic zones of the United States. This is more rendering of sort of geographic or geo-ecological kinds of regions of the United States. And in my work, what I've found is that the U.S. or the components of the U.S. are still too disconnected from each other. So I layered onto these regions so that the bright colors are these kind of natural ecological regions in the United States. The white patches are our largest population clusters, and the gray lines were actually the proposals for high-speed rail network. Now, of course, might as well delete those because that's not happening anytime soon. But why I bring this up again, because if you focus on the Great Lakes region, the Rust Belt, you've had a population outflow from states like Michigan and Illinois and others, and you still do. And yet, if you think about the climate, look at this from a climate oasis standpoint, we know that if you have that marginal dollar to invest in a future geography of habitation, actually the Great Lakes region looks really good on both sides of the border, of course. And that applies to a certain kind of rectangle that I'm mapping out that includes states like Minnesota and even upstate New York, parts of Pennsylvania and Ohio. So, the opposite, people are leaving those states now, but they may wind up, or they, meaning Americans more broadly, may wind up going back into those regions within the next couple of decades. And of course, there's a decent arbitrage there around land value right now. And so, as I mentioned before, the punchline is that people will be moving because people are leaving places now that actually they may be going back to, because we're not taking a full complex view of what is going to constitute a habitable geography and why. We're making narrow decisions about where we want to live tomorrow, but not what are going to be the right places a couple of decades from now. And so that's the approach that we're taking. So final point is this global one about complexity. The argument that I'm making in the book is that we're moving towards what I call civilization 3.0. In civilization 1.0, when we were a nomadic and agricultural species up until this sort of axial age, as it's known, we started to develop more cities and towns, and clustering the populations sort of became more settled, and we became a sedentary and industrial population. So that covers really the last, say, 2,000+ years, 3,000 or 4,000 years really, and the Industrial Revolution being the last couple of hundred years. What comes next? And I use this phrase quantum and circular. So quantum meaning we're always on the move. We can't pin us down, right? We're like particles in quantum physics. You can either know the location of the velocity, but not both. It's an analogy that I stretch out in the book. And circular, meaning, of course, striving for local self-sufficiency, upcycling of materials, recycling of water, and of course, localized food production and so forth. Some call this the ecopolis model as well. So, Arup has done this sort of scenario project where they map out 4 scenarios for 2050 of post-Anthropocene, in which we have arrived at this harmony, but it doesn't really say exactly where people are going to live in the world. So it doesn't, of course, tell you exactly where to be building. The greentocracy, but that requires significant restrictions on activity. We obviously don't see that degree of self-control on a global governance basis. Extinction Express sort of speaks for itself, but it also means a mad scramble of people seeking to move to sort of more climate propitious geographies. And then this sort of humans Inc. Scenario. So these are the 4 that Arup has sketched out. And what I've done is kind of take been reading the elements of that, trying to play them all forward. The truth is about scenario work, which is kind of the kind of bread and butter of what I do on a day-to-day basis, is that in the future always looks like a bit of all 4 scenarios, at least when we're doing these 2x2 kinds of matrices, and picking out those elements from this and many other scenario exercises that look at energy, look at climate change, look at economic growth patterns, and to really piece them all together into a puzzle. And just to come to the punchline again, I was not able to conclude, looking at every geography in the world, every country in the world, all the places that I've also traveled to and have done research and interviews in, not able to say for sure that even a place like Canada, even a place like Sweden, an enclave like Scotland and so forth, is going to get it right. It's going to be an evolving story. It's going to be ups and downs, some places thriving because of one set of conditions, but failing in another. And therefore, we as a species are going to be much more migratory than we have been in the past. And yet that said, it is our instinct to build, right? To build, to continue to build. And what my mission is to try and help people figure out why and where and how to do it smart. So thanks very much, Steve. Looking forward to our conversation.
Wow. That was fantastic, Parag. I know we've talked about these topics before. Every time it gets more and more focused, and this was a much fuller conversation about the climate oasis conversation. And I look forward to reading the book when the book comes out. Any idea on the date?
Oh, well, we're looking at spring 2021. Probably the next opportunity I'll even have to get on a plane and come over to the U.S. So we're just we're waiting for we're waiting for the U.S. election and the pandemic, and then we'll decide when to release the book.
Right. Well, so we've got there's all kinds of stuff to talk about. We've got questions that are coming in. So let me start with this one. There was just a technical question. Which IPCC forecast are you basing these migration patterns on?
So I'm not basing migration patterns on IPCC forecasts. To be clear, IPCC forecasts are used to inform or help us understand what the kind of temperature effect and various other climatological effects are going to happen because of climate change. And one of those variables is rise in temperatures. And then other scientists and researchers are extrapolating from that the impact on agriculture and so forth. And then also, for example, and based on that, the number of people who are no longer going to be in this optimal latitudinal band, for agriculture and so forth. So the IPCC itself is trying to make these neutral sites. And as you know, they break the world down into about 400 of these rectangular shaped sort of things. So we've been trying to take as many of those as possible and look at the dynamics within them. So again, climate alone is just one variable. It alone is not the sole driver of migration, right? But we do have more climate refugees in the world today than we have political refugees, and that says something.
Right. I was hoping you were going to give us the perfect place to be, but it sounds like it depends on how you define perfect and which elements you are most concerned about in the future going forward.
So again, it's very, very hard. Again, it's also sort of to each his own, right? What one chapter of the book is called Air-Conditioned Nations. And I simply said, okay, let's look at the large cities that are in the equatorial latitudes with growing populations that are, modern, livable, places where people are migrating to, despite climate change telling us that they're in trouble. And so there are two cities in the world actually that meet those criteria: large population, multiple million people in equatorial latitudes that are, first world. There's only two: it's Dubai and Singapore. So I started looking at what they're doing with air conditioning, and how critical a factor. Lee Kuan Yew famously said in his memoirs, "Were it not for air conditioning, modern civilization would not be possible here in this little tiny island." So I'm looking at whether or not, how they're adapting, whether or not it's, whether they're building dome cities like Dubai is basically doing with one of its projects, and whether or not they're going to continue to attract and retain people by providing this kind of climate oasis or sort of, these artificial habitats, if you will. So some people may prefer that and ride that out. Again, it's about relative gains, because if you are an Arab or an African and so forth, and you have enough money, or an Asian, people think about the air pollution in India and the political conditions and so forth. It's still the case that even though several 100,000 Indian migrant workers have now been airlifted out of the Gulf countries because of COVID and the economic shutdown and gone back to India, but if you are a wealthy Indian, you're still taking your suitcase of cash and moving to buy property in Dubai because it's being devalued right now because of the kind of slowdown. So again, such a swirl of factors, right? So that's one layer, but that's only a couple of million people. Larger scale, I've mentioned Canada earlier. What I already see, and anticipating one of the other questions too that we see here, is that Canadian real estate developers are looking further north. They are looking at their the freshwater supply, the rivers. What are the towns that are sort of from a regulatory standpoint, zoning standpoint, allowing for expansion of real estate development to put retirement colonies. There's this talk of, I forgot the Canadian phrase for it, but this sort of, they call themselves migratory birds or whatever.
Snowbirds.
Snowbirds, thank you. Yes, snowbirds.
Yeah.
So the snowbird effect with Canadians going to Florida is going to change because Florida is not looking so great, and but Canada is sort of balmy. So what does that mean for the amount of days that Canadians retirees and people who become retirees in Canada, which is a growing number of Americans, where are they going to want to be in Canada? I don't see many countries with that where the conversation is that advanced, saying let's start to think again 20 years ahead, what are going to be our livable geographies? Can we absorb more people? Do we want more people? Only Canada is saying more or less blank check, we're going to import people, hundreds of thousands of people, 1% or more of our population increase every single year until we reach 75 million people, which is more than double their present population. See, there's not a country on the planet Earth that is saying what I just said other than Canada. But they will because of things that we're not talking about, like the demographic contraction, right? I mean, the worst dependency ratios are in Japan and Europe. And there you have countries that are literally depopulating. All of Eastern Europe
Right.
Eastern Europe is rapidly depopulating, has been for decades. I've been writing about Eastern European depopulation for the last like 15 years. It hasn't changed, right? So every young person, leaves Bulgaria or Romania, but they've done great in COVID. They have, fantastic agricultural productivity, and they're now actually becoming popular places for expats or from Asians and Americans to actually go and live in because they're cheap, and they're switching their educational systems towards the English language. And countries like the Czech Republic are also becoming fertility clinic hubs. I bet you didn't expect me to throw that one out there. And I'm bringing out these anecdotes, Steve, because actually it's a reminder there's 55 different reasons why someone might go somewhere. It's like, wow, tuition is free in that country and they're in English now. I've got all this debt, or I don't want to have all this debt. I'll go move there. And lo and behold, Steve, when you research this, you find out that, lots and lots of Americans are now moving to the Czech Republic to either have babies or to study.
Wow.
And so there's a million factors that go into this. And then once you go somewhere, you tend to, and this is the whole point of what education as an incentive for migration has always been about. One of the things that sadly, obviously, the U.S. is currently, sort of contesting and rejecting. So, once you get the students, they tend to stay, right? They tend to make that place their home. So the battle for students also shapes the kind of future population centers of tomorrow as well. So again, I wish I could give one answer, but I've been spending, a couple of years looking at this, and there isn't one perfect place.
You did give a good, this is an instructive answer because there is no one size fits all, but in fact, some people may choose to stay in Dubai as the temperature goes over 35 and 40 and 45 degrees Celsius. And we'll come back to the technology conversation, if we're able to build infrastructure to allow humans to habitate those areas, that maybe people will stay in those areas. Obviously, we can't move the whole population be above the X parallel to where it's cooler,
right,
of the globe.
Right, which is why, again, so going back to the snowbirds, those who can afford to, they're being more seasonal migrations. I've been looking at Northern versus Southern Europe because a lot of Europeans are accustomed to coming down to the Mediterranean area, but it's getting too hot already in the spring, sort of the European equivalent of spring break, whereas it's actually quite temperate in the northern latitudes earlier in the year. So Swedes and Norwegians may just stay there, even though they own these properties in Barcelona, and they may go there only in the winter, rather than other times of year. So again, we're already seeing actually these shifts. Japan is really worth talking about. The ski seasons in the Alps and in Japan are also shifting. So that's impacting where in Japan people are buying, properties and what they're being used for. Yeah.
So back to my technology question. So given that there will always be a certain population that has the ability to be mobile, and they'll be able to go to different places but a large portion of the population does not have that mobility. Do you think that technology will allow us to continually make these areas more habitable? Being here in Boston, there's a big conversation about seawalls and dealing with sea level rise, but that's only one, as you point out, that's only one of the many variables that we have to deal with. Food supplies, temperature, water, all of these elements that we are concerned about. Do you think technology could be a solution?
I actually am very impressed with the kinds of technologies. So if you think about desalination technologies are getting better and better, and our ability to power them through alternative and renewable sources is a critical variable. Can't be anywhere without water, right? And once you are in a place that is able to generate or produce even atmospheric water generation, and of course, then the secondary infrastructures around wastewater recycling and so forth, there's a lot of promise there. Now, it's not yet going to support a population the size of Jakarta, or and so forth. But it is impressive what's happening with that technology. With the hydroponic and aquaponic stuff, very, very impressed with the output, the yield that is coming out of these facilities, and from the Netherlands to China. Huge output, so there is a possibility for local self-sufficiency. And of course, if we all become a bit more vegetarian, it's a lot more feasible as well. So, and also what I'm seeing, and this is one of the sections of the book where I talk about kind of mobile real estate, you're seeing a lot of growth in this area on mobile homes and, prefabricated housing that with its self-contained, sort of plumbing and other things, so we don't need enough off-grid power. So you actually don't need to be sticking into the ground as much. And so that
lighter footprint by
lighter
some
footprint,
measures,
yeah,
by some measures, a lighter footprint.
right. So to me, mobile real estate is itself an asset class, that is, not fully developed by any stretch of the imagination, but is something that we should think about. But so just in terms of environmental related technologies, sure. But again, is everyone going to benefit simultaneously from these breakthroughs? No, unfortunately not.
Right. So a couple of great questions about capital. And I think you can see them there as well. Do we have, you listed urban farms. We know from research at the Center for Real Estate that there is institutional money that is funding vertical food farms, urban vertical food farms. Can you speak a bit about where you've seen capital going? A lot of really great, interesting theories and ideas about types of real estate product types, but where are you seeing some legitimate commitment to these new types of models?
Well, you're right that this has, again, been an area where there's strong support from, obviously we know that venture capital and private equity have looked in these areas, and now, the companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible, this and that, those have gotten more and more funding. Now even sovereign wealth funds have gone into it. The Singaporean sovereign wealth funds have been investing in those companies, as have others. So government support will be very strong in the wake of COVID. Again, it's already there in Japan, for example, in Australia. There's been strong, governmental support. That's really going to ramp up now. And I've talked to a number of governments that are looking at, as I gave the example of Singapore as well. The UAE has committed huge capital to doing underground hydroponic food production, because obviously it doesn't have to be above ground. It doesn't even take up, real estate. So,
and even discussion about former tunnels in the UK and in Europe. They're growing underground in abandoned tunnels.
Right, exactly. So, the repurposing, this whole sort of brownfield, again, it's not in any case that these countries suffer from a lack of availability of land anyway, but you might as well do it underground because you do want to ensure the kind of redundancy or security of those infrastructures. Right. So, different countries will approach it different ways, whether it's above ground or underground is less, significant than that, than increasing the yield. And that's where we see some gains. But there's so many countries at this point, Steve. I mentioned, we've talked about so many already. This is a private sector led in the U.S., of course, whereas the public sector gets more involved in Asian countries and Arab countries, and it's a bit more of a mixed picture as it typically is in Europe.
You mentioned the mobility, the idea of mobile real estate. Do you think COVID has pointed us in the direction of a localization, a return? Part of a broader question, what do you think about the future of globalization from the standpoint of supply chains? Are we going to go in the other direction, do you think?
Well, I've written a book or two on that. It kind of takes a while to get into the supply chain and the future of supply chains. But I'll tell you what, if we could answer it in just take one slice of the answer, this is the bumper sticker. It's that regionalization is the new globalization, right? And ... that's not a bad thing. I certainly associate myself with globalization. People associate me with globalization, but not in the sense of a laissez-faire free market champion of open borders and, full far-flung global supply chains for the sake of it. That's rank ideology. That makes no sense. In the world of energy, we shouldn't want global supply chains. Why should we have to pump oil in one place, put it on a tanker, and destroy the planet just to get a barrel of oil to the other side of the world when we can have localized energy supplies through alternative and renewable resources, right? So I don't want energy globalization. I want energy deglobalization, and so should anyone who loves the planet. In other areas like digital services, we should want rampant globalization. We should want lots more fiber optic internet cables on the ocean floor so that we can have conversations like this at times like this. So it depends, on what industry one is talking about, what geographies, but, does it make more sense for there to be a North American Union? Just 2 weeks ago, Canada, US, Mexico signed the USMCA agreement. We're moving towards a North American Union. It's not a phrase that Trump would ever use. It's a phrase that originates in Canada, actually, because they are so open-minded. But it's something that's happening through the back door. You've got the European Union finally having a common fiscal policy through the back door, something they couldn't do before. But huge support now. I mean, the fiscal stimulus in Europe is also premised on and is leading towards a much larger set of subsidies around strengthening domestic industries, especially in clean tech and other areas. And Asia is integrating as well, and China wants to substitute all US imports with imports from the rest of Asia. Everything from soybeans to semiconductors, they want to make sure they're getting from more pliant trade partners, not from the United States. So the world is irrevocably moving in a multi-regional kind of framework. That doesn't mean we cannot restore transcontinental connectivity, but right now we can't even get the US-Canada border back open. So it's going to be some time.
Right. So a last question about given that our attendees are in the real estate industry, what would you give as a key takeaway or a big idea related to people who invest in real estate, who develop real estate, who are looking around the world at new opportunities and new product types, given all of the fascinating work that you're doing? What's a common thread related to real estate itself?
It's a great question, Denon. And I want to emphasize the product type part, because the industry, as you know, and as I think enlightened leaders in the industry are themselves saying, it has to be part of the political conversation around the crisis that we face in areas like affordable housing, for example, or repurposing assets right now to cope with a future that's going to be less driven by travel and tourism. Right? So what to do with cruise ships, what to do with hotels, how can we do more for affordable housing, student housing, and so forth. So thinking about, what purpose the asset classes serve, what commercial obviously has to, rethink itself in cities for an age of remote work and the threat to coastal real estate in cities as well, New York, Miami, and so forth. So I think that that is a critical conversation. And one by one, the leaders have to say, you know what, maybe there's going to be a loss leading asset, but we're going to repurpose it. We're going to think, about the next 20 years, 30 years of this asset, and we're going to think about what it's useful for. And I like to hear that conversation. I'm really glad to see that. But who's actually doing it? You and your colleagues and your clients and people in this area are going to know better than me in terms of right now. It's certainly, though, I have a lot of ideas around what to do with specific assets. I just haven't, sort of written the white paper yet for, XYZ to say, I think you should do this with this and this, but I hope to God, that everyone listening and that the industry is really thinking about full spectrum across the board, across their assets, what's it really going to be for? And so I think about the youth. I didn't mention this enough, Steve, but let me just get at the, part of the motivation for this project is when we think about, our demographic structure and the future of economies, we focus so much on aging, right? You've heard the word aging a million times in the last 5, 6, 10 years, and what that means for economies. No one focuses on global youth. And it's the funniest thing, because actually 60% of the human population is millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha, about 65%. So people under the age of 40. So I forgot to mention this earlier, but my entire book excludes old people. Hate to be cruel, but I did it for a reason. I wanted to look at the people who are actually mobile, who are actually spending. Because of course, most people, once you are in your 50s or 60s, you're kind of stuck in place or settled. I do actually have a whole section about retirees shifting their geography for financial, so I'm not actually being that mean. But what the industry needs to be thinking about is, what are the priorities? What are the consumption patterns and capacity? And what are the geographies of interest for the 6 billion young people in the world? And I saw absolutely no one talking about demographics focused entirely on youth. So I wanted to overcompensate and look at the geography of global youth. And they are the ones who are going to determine which economies win and lose, to put it super bluntly, in the next 30 years, right? Obviously. So where they go, where they are today, where they go tomorrow, what they want to spend on, how they want to live, that's where we need to be focusing in terms of the future of the industry. So I devoted my research entirely to the preferences and habits and geographies of today's global youth.
Excellent. That topic alone, we'll have you back to talk about that topic alone, because that's significant. And maybe we'll get you together with Joe Coughlin from the Age Lab, who was with us earlier today, so that we can have a sort of counterpoint for the different demographic perspectives, because you're right, significant impact on what gets built, where it gets built, how it gets built. And I think that's a rich conversation. So Parag, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. We'll look forward to seeing you in person on campus soon. Parag Khanna, founder and managing partner of Future Map. And thank you very much for joining us.
Really appreciate it, Steve. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Have a great rest of the conference. Take care.
Thank you.